Hi, this is the Daf Shevui video for Daf Yod Daled of Masechet Ketubot. I wanted to give little bit of a background information, a little bit of a background discussion. First of all, broadly speaking, on the importance of yichus, of lineage, in the eyes of the rabbis, and certainly in the eyes of the Kohanim. Our society is a society that takes lineage less into consideration. When choosing a partner, certainly I did, and I think most of the people I know, the first thing you do is you find your personal connection with that partner. Are you compatible personality-wise? Are you attracted to that person? Do you see yourself living your life with that person? And then I think maybe it's a little bit of a nice thing if she comes from a family that you can get along with, or he comes from a family that one can get along with. But we certainly don't take lineage, I'm talking about blood lineage, into primary consideration. Although I do remember, my parents being happy that they thought my wife came from a good family, which she does. And I do think that somebody, if you find somebody you're attracted to and their father is in prison and the mother is a drug addict, your family may not be too happy, even if that person themselves seems to be a decent person. Lineage plays a small role. But in the time of the rabbis, lineage played a huge role in determining marital choice. A person was certainly considered to be the product of their family, both in terms of the culture, the social structure that they had adopted, but also I think in terms of the blood, and that they thought that a person's personality, their moral virtues, their characteristics were largely dictated by the family from which they come. So throughout this Masechet, I think we have to take that into consideration and remember that marital choice, one of the primary considerations was yichus, lineage. Were they from a good family? Were they from a Kohanic family, etc.? The second thing I want to broadly talk about is the issue of who can a Kohen marry, because I know this confuses a lot of people. A Kohen, regular Kohen, can marry a widow, but he cannot marry a grusha, a divorcee. Now, when a Kohen does marry a grusha, even though it's an avera, it's a sin, nothing happens to that Kohen, but his children are not Kohanim. His children are what's called in Hebrew chalalim. You might interpret that as disqualified, secularized, if you will, Kohanim who have lost their Kedusha. Now, the halalness of a person's being a halal, a disqualified Kohen, follows through the father's side. So if your father was a Kohen, if a man's father was a Kohen, he is a Kohen. But a man's father is a Halal, he is a Halal. Now, a woman could be mitchareret. Right, that's the word we use in Hebrew. She could become disqualified from marrying a priest, and that happens by either her marrying a Kohen before, even if he dies and she's only a widow, she is now a Charara, and she is not supposed to marry a priest, a Kohen. Davar Sheni, the second issue, is if she ever had sexual relations with somebody who is prohibited to her, even if, and this is very difficult to accept, but even if that sexual relations was against her will or unwitting or it was rape, she is now no longer permitted to marry a priest, a Kohen. This is why there is a halacha that somebody who had a woman who had had sexual relations with a non-Jew who is prohibited to her is not supposed to subsequently marry a Kohen. I'm not going to talk about here, at least in this forum, what do people in the modern world, what do people, especially in the liberal movements and the conservative movement, do. But technically speaking, a woman in that situation should no longer be able to marry a Kohen. A woman who had an adultery, even if she is widowed from her current marriage, can no longer ever marry a Kohen. So that's what the issue of the prohibition of a priest. Only the high priest cannot marry a widow, but a regular priest can marry a widow. So it's something important to keep in mind. In the Gemara here, we talk about an almanat isa. She is the widow of somebody who may have been a halal. a disqualified Kohen. The fact that she's a widow means she should subsequently be allowed to marry a Kohen, but we don't really know who her first husband was, and therefore we have a doubt about whether she is allowed to subsequently marry a Cohen. I hope that answers some questions. I encourage you to sign up for the Facebook page where there's a lot of interesting discussion about the material that we are learning.